All right. Project Herpetoculture, episode 34. Before I introduce our guest, I'll introduce myself, Phil Leitz of Arids Only, and then Roy Arthur Blodgett, my well-dressed, well-mic'd, and well-setted in the beautiful backgrounded co-host, Roy Arthur Blodgett of Wellspring Herpetoculture. We got to do our little housekeeping dealy. So Charlie's going to throw in a little wedge of ads and sponsorship stuff here, because we have some awesome sponsors that we'd appreciate everybody to give a little support to. And also shout out to Charlie for editing our audio and being a legend, excellent scholarly gentleman that he is. And then shout out to Dylan at Dylan at Home for his wonderful podcast and for hosting our network. Hosting our show on his network is what I meant to say. He's the GOAT. This is it's crazy that we're on episode 34. That's kind of bananas. I feel like I said that at episode 30 and it's still weird.
Yeah, it is.
It's nuts. It's a very, very strange sensation to feel like we're getting further and further into this. But with all that out of the way, I'm going to toss it over to my man, Roy, to introduce our awesome guest.
Yeah. So our guest today is Connor Wardle. Connor, welcome to Project Herpetoculture. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you all for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. I've been looking forward to this, and I really appreciate your flexibility with scheduling and all that craziness. So to begin, I think it'd be good to just hear a little bit about, how you started out in herpetoculture and kind of where you fit now as you see it.
Okay, excellent. So I guess starting off, just a little 3-year-old running around my backyard, catching Gulf Coast toads, Texas spiny lizards, and rough earth snakes, stuff like that. There was a pond near my house where we had diamondback water snakes. I thought those were just like the coolest things ever. Kind of the larger snake in the area, I guess, in suburbia. And then I didn't really keep reptiles, you just keep them for the weekend, and let them go and things like that, But then I got into Boy Scouts at kind of a younger age. I get Cub Scouts at first grade or whatnot, work up to Boy Scouts, things like that.
Yeah.
But my first summer camp at Worth Ranch Scout Camp out in Palo Pinto, Texas, kind of my home away from home. I talk about that place a lot. So my first summer camp was out there at Worth Ranch, and one of my friends convinced me to sign up for the Reptile Study Merit Badge. And I got into that class. One of the requirements is you have to own a reptile for a period of 90 days. And so for that requirement, I went to my local PetSmart and was talked into the perfect beginner pet reptile, the Chinese water dragon. Which is not the perfect first reptile, and I learned that pretty quick. But after that, I had a few leopard geckos, things like that. My folks at the time were against snakes, and I was a big lizard guy for a bit, just running around catching spiny lizards, like I said, things like that. Eventually, kind of getting into high school, I was in the pre-vet pathway, because I guess in Texas we have to in 8th grade we have to decide our entire future for the rest of our life, So we would take these career pathways and things like that in high school, and so I chose pre-vet, like I said. And one of the requirements for that class was each semester we had to have 40 hours volunteering for some sort of animal related field. And so going back to Boy Scouts, there's this used to be this big Boy Scout center called the Longhorn Activity Center, part of Longhorn Council BSA, where there was this facility that housed every native U.S. Lamprobeltis, Pantherophis, and there's a few oddball species like some Pituophis, things like that. We would do educational reptile shows, and we would breed and sell snakes on the side and sell those to keep up or to make up for feeder costs, things like that. So I got a job there cleaning snake cages and some of the lizard cages and things like that. It just kind of went from there. Kind of got into localities and that whole rabbit hole there, and just So I guess as far as how I got into what I'm doing now currently, if I'm not rambling on too much.
No, ramble more.
Okay, cool. So I got the job working for that Boy Scout center there. And then during a portion of the summer, I would go back to Worth Ranch Scout Camp and staff there as a nature staffer. And I did that for 6 years. And just each summer, at the Boy Scout summer camp, you're coming across snakes, lizards, whatever, and to minimize human and snake conflicts, with the redneck scoutmasters, they're like, every good snake's a dead snake or whatever. I don't know. What we would do as a nature staff is we would collect the snake. We would either relocate it if we already had an example in the nature lodge, or we would decide to keep that animal for just for the 4 weeks that summer camp ran. We release it back where we found it, and of course we had frozen feeder mice and things like that. But I caught my first coach whip in 2017. It's a female to just tan phase, nice little Palo Pinto locality there. Did some research on it. Nobody really had anything good to say about keeping Masticophis at all in captivity. Otherwise, like just saying that they're super poopy, super bitey snakes. All they want to do is just run away. And they're just not made for captivity. And so we had one in the nature center that I caught that summer. I just threw in a mouse and it took it, and there was no need for sensing or anything like that. And so I'm like, well, let's just see where it goes. There's a lot of experimenting now, and to learn, you really have to experiment with some things and stuff like that. And then I just kind of went from there, learning about different Masticophis species and things like that. There were some night snakes at the facility that I worked at for a bit, and then I just kind of saw those at an expo one day and was like, oh, it'd be nice to give those a shot again. And now I've got a nice collection of Hypsiglena as well. The Texas night snakes, the Jani, and then the Torquata now, which are the desert night snakes. And then I don't know, I just kind of had a nice soft spot for kind of the more underrated stuff that people just say don't do well. I kind of don't want to like prove people wrong, but just give things a shot and see what happens. So that's kind of what I'm doing now.
Yeah. So tell me more about this place that you got a job at, this weird, what was it called again? This center that had all
the
these
Longhorn Activity Center.
Yeah, and it had all these native reptiles.
Yeah. So we had at one point there was 350 North American colubrids. There was an off property, like outside of Fort Worth, at one of the scout camps. There was a venomous collection there as well, that had at least one example of every venomous native Texas reptile, with the exception of the Texas coral, just because snake feeders, things like that. And then there were some lizards as well. I can go through and send you guys some pictures and things like that later. We had some chuckwallas that were really cool. We had some guy from Arizona. We didn't do our research. Just was wholesaling wild caught lizards from Arizona, which is not great. And that guy has done his time now. But we had a group of alligator lizards from him, some collared lizards, chuckwallas, and then we picked up some other stuff. Like there was a desert horn lizard that we had for a little bit, and some zebra tail lizards, which were my favorite lizards that I've ever kept for a little bit of time. They were insane. But with them being wild caught, there were some difficulties that they had adjusting and things like that. But they did well for a while. They're pretty good. So
can you? I mean, you don't have to say it on the recording, but can you put in the chat that guy's name? I'm curious. I want to know if I know it.
Okay. Yeah. I'll go back and I'll have to look him up.
Okay.
In my email and things like
Yeah,
that.
please. Please, because I would be genuinely curious to know if it's a guy I know who has recently kind of dropped off the map over the last. Anyway, yeah, be really curious to know. And is that place still around?
No. So during COVID, the council itself had to make some budget cuts and things like that. And it just wasn't there were supposed to be STEM camps and things like that going on. And just over the years with different management at that facility, the STEM camps weren't really doing as well as they should have. And there was some leadership changes at the council level, and reptiles weren't something that they wanted to spend money and time in. So all of those snakes, they got kind of like my boss at that center. His name's Jeff Peters. My kind of mentor that got me into all of this locality and this North American colubrid awesomeness, so it kind of got the animals got distributed between me and him. He's got quite a bit in an insulated garage at his house now.
Wow.
He's still breeding and doing things like that there, but I've kind of found my niche and kind of stepped away a little bit from the Lamprey-Peltis and Pantherophis game there.
And how did you start at the Fort Worth Zoo?
Yeah, so I was just every day my normal schedule. I go through fauna, make sure I didn't miss anything there. The fauna classified. I go through kingsneck.com. I go through Morph Market, and then I start going through Facebook. And on Facebook, there was this little pop-up ad. It's like, oh, the Fort Worth Zoo is hiring, become part of our crew or whatnot, And so I was just scrolling through the job positions just because, I mean, it's been like a 3-year-old dream for me to work at the zoo. And then I saw this position pop up. It was Louisiana pine snake tech, Louisiana pine snake tech. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like my dream job, getting to work with a snake species that I can't work with here in Texas because of legal reasons. They're endangered in the state of Texas and Louisiana. Well, I guess they're federally endangered, I guess, protected, things like that. So the species that I never thought that I could work with, number one. Number two, you're just getting to work with snakes all day, and it's just awesome. So I just went ahead, I filled out an application. Let me wind back real quick. I talked to a Facebook friend that I haven't really communicated with a whole lot. His name's Stephen Hammock. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the name there. Yeah. He was the former director of the herp department at Fort Worth Zoo. I just kind of just shot him a little Facebook message, without really talking to him a whole lot. And I was like, hey, B, this is like a dream job for me. Do you have any advice or things like that? Just for the application process and resumes and cover letters and things like that. And he's like, just be honest up front and just be a good person, and they'll be happy to hear you out. And I just shot it in thinking, oh, like I don't really expect anything from this, but I don't want to look back on it and be like, oh, I just let that, pass me by,
Yeah, of course.
So I went ahead and put myself out there. It worked out. So I'm pretty excited to be in the spot that I'm in right now. So
yeah, for sure.
That is awesome, man.
And I know you can't necessarily talk a lot about the job in particular and your, whatever, but are you able to say like a little bit of how your day-to-day goes, like what your day is like there? It's like, oh, I go in and I can't say the specifics, but I basically just get to work with these specific things and then I go home and it's cool. Or, I mean, I don't know. I don't mean to push it, but
no, you're good. Yeah. I'm behind the scenes in my own little private building, I walk in, sterilize my shoes, and then I put on these super awesome Crocs that are sterilized as well. And I'm crocking it the whole day, take care of last year's hatchlings, just getting them all up to size for release. And then I take a little bit of a break. I go to the next room, which has kangaroo rats, Texas kangaroo rats, another SSP. Just basically feed them, make sure everybody's healthy and doing well. Which, I mean, they're all doing fine. They're just gearing up for breeding and things like that. But just feed them and then clean the building, and then I walk back over to the pine snake area and just take care of the adults.
Sick.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That is a pretty dreamy job for sure.
Yeah, that's tight as hell. Those kangaroo rats are got to be a real trip.
Yeah, they're neat. Of course they're nocturnal, so I don't see them a whole lot. But there's one that will come out and eat whenever I'm dropping veggies and things like that. So that's always good to see.
They're really interesting critters.
Yeah.
I spent some time with them down in one of my favorite places in California. Is this kind of, I don't even want to say the name of it on on air because it's such a special place, but I will. It's the Carrizo Plain. and it's like one of the last like intact native grasslands in California, and full of kangaroo rats of a few different species, including the giant kangaroo rats. And
Nice.
it's just we go night driving there, and it's so hilarious to just watch them cruising along, out
Dude.
and getting chased by owls. And
Yeah.
we were
There's-
sleeping out one night, and one of my friends, we're just camping out under the stars, and he woke up and there was one on him, like just like sitting there, like looking at him. They're everywhere down there.
That's great. How
Yeah.
cool is that? I always laugh at kangaroo rats when you see them rip across the road while you're night cruising, just boing, 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 boing. They're going like a million miles an hour, those little bastards.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
amazing.
They're so cool. So Connor, so tell me a little bit about what draws you to the specific animals that you're working with. Like, what is it in particular that you find so intriguing about, say, the coachwhips and the night snakes? Like, I know it's sort of like a little bit of a vague question, but I guess they seem, because I feel like North American lizards maybe get a little bit of attention, right? But and then you get some North American snakes, but that get a little bit of attention, but they tend to be from the east in general.
Right.
But it's not every day that you see people toying around with some of the desert snakes, like I don't know why. And so do you have any thoughts on why that might be, and then on what it is that makes you so intrigued by those particular creatures specifically?
Well, just so coachwhips are just like, you look at their face, and it's just, the head scales are just so cool.
Yeah.
And then their size is pretty amazing as well. Their strength, like I saw one, one of the coachwhips that I caught a few years ago, regurgitated a baby rattlesnake that was still alive.
Whoa.
And then, so that was a really neat experience to see that, but it didn't have a good quality of life. Like, that rattlesnake was pretty rough, so I humanely put it down, and then I later fed it back to the snake, but just watching it just like totally just like hammer down on, it's just so cool there. Hopefully I don't get hate for that. I'm sorry, but whatever. Actually, I'm not sorry. It was cool to watch anyway. Yeah.
It's a circle of life.
Anyway, yeah, circle of life, nature is metal, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so just they're like, their strength is amazing, and then just like when the lights turn on in my room, as far as like captive like keeping and things like that, whenever the lights turn on in my room, they'll like duck their head out a little bit, make sure that I'm not like the big scary human is like clonkering around and stuff. Like, I'll hang out for a little bit, just be still. Just watching them come out and bass is just like the coolest. Like, just watching them do their thing. Like, I don't know how to say it like in a professional way, but that's just the coolest thing to me ever. And then, so like I talked about localities a little bit. Like at the Boy Scout Center, we worked with a few different localities of gray banded king snakes. That's kind of the first, I guess, whenever I was cleaning snake cages, that was the first species that I was like introduced to, because they were like the least nippy compared to like a Florida king snake or a Texas rat snake or whatever, just looking through apps like iNaturalist and just watching the different herp pages on Facebook and seeing like the variation of Masticophis throughout their ranges, and like the different species as well. So like, oh my gosh, sorry. I just like Pisces, like the red racers, like in the same state, like there's so much like variability. Like in Arizona, like I've got one from Pima County that is like brick red, like almost like hardly any patterning, and you've got one more from like La Paz that's going to be have a little bit more patterning, a little bit more kind of like a brownish pink, if that makes any sense. So I don't know, just the colorations are so variable, and it's just like, I don't know. It's like, the milk snake guys that have like selling ops from a couple different counties, there's different variations there and things like that. But it's just so cool, like the phenotype differences and things like that. It's just so cool to me. And just I don't feel like people are giving them like their shot, just
Yeah,
because of what's written and what's out there,
Yeah,
so I'm
no.
doing what I can to kind of establish a market. Not that I want to make money off these, but like I want to try and get like more people excited about these and trying them out and things like that.
Yeah.
So we can get some captive bred animals out there.
Yeah. No,
Did that
absolutely.
answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
of course,
cool,
of
cool.
course. No, I mean,
Yeah.
because a lot of my personal fascination with the American Southwest kind of stems from chuckwallas and collared lizards in particular.
Mhm.
There's something about it's the same kind of thing with the collared lizards. You get sorry, I keep drinking this beer and I keep burping. But you get so many different locality differences. And when
Yeah.
people think of collared lizards, the first thing they think of is those bright green and blue Crotophytus
Mhm.
calaris, which okay, that's cool. Like no hate on that particular species, but there's a ton of different species of collared lizards in the United States, and they're really, really interesting and really beautifully patterned and really diverse and complex and intelligent and fascinating. And same thing with chuckwallas. They all of the ones on the mainland may be Soromalis ater, but each locality is their own thing. They're so vastly different from one another, and that doesn't even account the island chucks, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of have the same sensibility that there's something about these sort of backdoor these like backyard species that are kind of just underappreciated or there's not like this big intrigue for them, at least not. It's kind of like a grass is greener thing, right? It's like you hear all these stories of collectors in China and Taiwan and Southeast Asia that want to pay top dollar for all of our native turtles, but then but everyone here is like, oh yeah, it's right there in the backyard, I don't care. No one really cares that much about them. But then we'll do the same thing for stuff that comes from, I'm going to go nuts for somebody who can travel into Algeria and find me some Acanthanura. I'll lose my mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's kind of a strange thing, don't you think?
Yeah. And just like going back to like the phenotype stuff, like you can find an animal that's like just as blue as like a Billinotis, the Sonoran whipsnacks. You can find something like insanely blue in like southwestern New Mexico, southeastern Arizona. That are like just as blue as those collared lizards, or even I don't want to compare them to like a ornata because I haven't seen those in person. But like some of the photos that I've seen, like you can find like just as blue, like that light blue tint as adults. Just
Oh yeah.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Some of those Sonoran whips they're like baby blue and gold.
Yeah.
It's just like I used to obsess over those when I was a teenager because I kept Masticophis back then, and we've talked about that offline. I had Pisceus and Teniotis and but yeah, I totally just get it what you're speaking to in terms of just like how overlooked that whole genus is. And it's also like there are a lot of different species too represented in the US and even represented in Texas alone.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of diversity in Masticophis. So it's kind of like it feels like there's just like this like totally untapped potential there in terms of like learning from those animals and exploring all the different phenotype variability. I mean, from even within each species, there's so much variability. Just amazing snakes.
Just the fact that they start off as like lizard feeders, that's just a turn off for I would say the majority of people in just modern captive keeping, but they'll sit there and work for like 4 months to get this milk snack that's like thinner than your pinky, to take a pinky head or something like that. It's the same process, and I mean
it's the same thing. Yeah. And, it's like also, I think that we have more and more options now. There's things like Reptilinks available and they're like, I think those are total game changer for some of the more, obligate lizard or frog eating specialists. they're kind of more expensive, but they're also more calorically dense as well. And so it kind of evens out to some extent. And also with the babies, sometimes I had not with Masticophis, but with Colubra, I've kept Colubra Mormon, the Western yellow belly racer out here. And the first one I ever had actually was a neonate that still had its full pattern. They go through this ontogenetic change. And when I caught it, it was in a big old concrete cattle trough, and it was eating Pacific tree froglets, little tiny ones.
Oh wow.
And so kind of on a whim, I had it at home, and I was like, okay, I think it's attracted to the movement. And so I threw in a handful of crickets. And it just went nuts and ate all of the crickets within like a few minutes. It ate like half a dozen crickets, and I was like, oh, okay, so there's something there, And then what I did with it was I did chain feeding basically. So like while it was nomming down a cricket, I just put a pinky up to its nose on tongs, and it nommed down the pinky, and before long it was big enough to just take mice on its own. So there's, I don't know, it's like, I feel like, people get so deterred, and by these little, old kind of persistent, stubborn stories and interpretations that, as you're proving, can actually be not necessarily true if you're a little bit patient.
Yeah. And as far as we talking about Masticophis a lot, but as far as like the night snakes and the glossy snakes go, I work 7 days a week, so it's pretty rough schedule, But I work part-time at the zoo and then full-time at a restaurant. So coming off the restaurant job, it's just nice to come home and like see like the night snakes on their rock walls. They got the universal rock setups, and they're crawling around hunting, smelling the little bits of a knoll that just are lingering around. And then the glossy snakes just looking like subocs or with their little goofy faces. It's awesome. But yeah.
I'm super curious about with the coach whips. Well, two things that come to my mind, and you don't have to necessarily get into like extreme detail, but can you talk a little bit about how you have those guys set up, like what their enclosures look like, and kind of how you're thinking about that? And then secondarily, you mentioned the locality diversity and the fact that they can have so many different looks and so much variability between locales and between individuals. Do you know yet if that stuff is like heritable, or are they just super polymorphic? Is it really all over the place, or do they tend to sort of like breed more true to their individual locality, or is it maybe not, are you not quite there yet?
So as far as caging goes, basically what I do is I go and find the largest aquariums or whatnot that I could find on Facebook Marketplace. I've got my adults; they're all set up in like between like 100 to 150 to like the biggest one's like 175 gallon aquariums that I've got. They're super heavy, and it sucks whenever I have to move them and things like that.
Yeah, that's
thankfully it doesn't happen a whole lot. Yeah. But I've been saving up. I want to do this all at the same time, but I've been saving up for some nice plastic enclosures or PVC like enclosures. Kind of not sure what company I want to go with because it's a big thing. Like I want to have swinging front doors rather than the sliding glass because I don't like the noise and the vibration that it makes, and it kind of messes with the snakes a little bit. So that's something I'm kind of looking around for right now. But the eventual goal in my head and for my dream facility, which is going to be several years out, just because I'm on the younger side still. But as far as my dream vision for this whole project is to keep them in 8 foot long by 3 feet deep by 4 foot tall PVC enclosures.
Wow.
Like the house, there's a lady in Europe that works with Pisces and Testicus as well. Erica Othenek and her husband Tomas. But they keep all their Masticophis in pairs, and I'd like to try that. They've got some pretty good success over there doing that. So that's the eventual goal for what I'm doing. But for now, it's just the largest like 150-gallon aquariums that I can find right now. So yeah. And then as far as the like heritable traits, as far as phenotypes and things like that, I haven't actually had a successful clutch yet of Masticophis, unfortunately. And things were panning out to be great this year. However, I lost my male La Paz Pisces, unfortunately. I do have, like, I've got a kind of a backup male, I guess you could say, kind of a little bit on the smaller side, but I think he could still get the job done. So I've just got to supervise that because my female came in as a snake feeder, which is a whole other thing. But I'll try that, see what happens. But of course, you know, you got to be looking out for the animals' overall welfare and things like that. You know, so I don't want to force anything that doesn't happen. But anyway, so continuing on, I have yet to actually produce a successful clutch of Masticophis. So I cannot answer that question. But as far as just looking at the just different iNaturalist just IDs from around, they are just variable within the areas that they are from. Like in specifically Pima County, Arizona, you've got the nice brick red examples of the Pisces, the red racers, like the one that I've got. And then you also have like solid black Pisces as well, which are super cool, super nice examples there. In Palo Pinto County, the area that I herp kind of the most, you'll see like some nice like dark brown, almost, I don't want to say chocolate, but pretty dark brown Western coachwhips. And then you'll also see kind of like the more like blonde individuals there as well. So it just kind of, I'm not sure what's going on there really to give you a solid answer, but hopefully we'll find out.
Yeah, totally.
That's awesome. So in the enclosures that you're keeping them in, do you keep them sort of like a diurnal lizard then? Like lights and stuff?
Yeah. So as far as how I've got their setups kind of, so I've got on my animals that are out of quarantine, I do it like a topsoil and sand mixture. Just kind of make it look right from the pictures that I've seen on different just field herping photos and things like that. Try and match it, you know, like a few podcasts or probably one of the earlier podcasts you were talking about bringing back bags of sand from Baja, and I would love to do that, but you know, I can't really do that right now. So I'm just trying to match it as best as I can there. And then as far as just how the cage is set up, I provide a bunch of like branches and things like that, because specifically, I guess for your whip snakes, you know, they're going to be, if you come across them in the wild, they're going to shoot up a tree or and do it like a little scrub brush, you know, so I try and replicate that as best I can. So that way, of course, I have multiple hides there as well. But if I come in the room, you know, they can just have that kind of like brushy kind of thing there as like a barrier, you know, if they don't feel comfortable running to a hide or whatnot, for whatever reason. So I've got that there to kind of have different temperature gradients around the cage there as well, you know, different basking spots, you know, with different temps and things like that. And then I also stack tile at like kind of an angle. So like they're angled kind of like this. So that way they get a temperature gradient in they're kind of on the warm side, I guess they're tile hide that I've kind of got like stacked tiles going. That way they can get a temperature gradient within that hide as well. And then, of course, with all of my animals, I like to provide humidity gradients. It really hurts my head. No hate to people that ask these questions and things like that, but whenever people ask like, what should the humidity percentage be in my cage for my desert king snake, you know, I'm like, is it shedding fine? You probably don't need to do a whole lot. You know? You're going to cause an RI if you try and get like, there's no huge difference, in my opinion, between 25% and 30% humidity. But apparently it's the end of the world if you're at whatever you need to, you're not at, you know. So I provide these little, I take these little sterilite locking bins, and I just kind of make like a little humid hide in there with some moss and things like that. That way they can kind of get that gradient as best they can, as well for sheds and things like that, proper hydration. So.
What and do they bask at pretty high temps, or are they? I mean, I'm just wondering because
yeah. So whenever they come out in the morning, they'll kind of sit up underneath their hot spot for a bit. The hottest that it gets inside, like the hottest part of the basking temperature there, is around 97 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And then they range like the coolest part of the cage would be like 78 to 80 degrees, which is kind of the ambient temp in the room.
Yeah.
So they'll sit up on that basking spot for a bit, and then just kind of depends on what, like if they're digesting food, they'll kind of hang out in the kind of like the middle area a little bit, kind of around. I don't just they do what they need to do, really, but they don't sit underneath the basking temperature for like more than I'd say like 20 minutes or so.
Right.
They don't need to stay that hot for that long. So yeah.
And you collecting your own individuals, your own adults, or your own?
So I've collected the tan phase, like everything from Palo Pinto I've collected myself. I've
Yeah.
got some stuff from Lake Bridgeport as well, which I've got a really nice banded tan phase I haven't posted a lot of pictures of recently. But like the Pisceus, the Billinotis, those have been gifted to me.
Yeah.
Just because coming from Arizona, there's different laws and things like that between states and all that. And I've just got kind of just some really good friends, that see that I've got a passion for these species, and they just kind of send me some stuff and I send them some stuff, and it just, you got to help your friends out, so.
Yeah, hell yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so when you go to find them, how in the hell do you get your hands on those goddamn snakes? Because listen, I am admittedly, snakes are a weak point in my understanding of herpetoculture. Not because I've never kept snakes, but I've never bred any snakes, and I've never, I've kept some, but I've just never bred them, and I tend to be more of a lizard guy. I prefer lizards a little bit more. And also, anytime I've seen those things in the wild, I cannot keep up with them, not even slightly. I don't know how anybody ever gets their hands on those freaking snakes. How does that happen?
So whenever I go out, I try and go out in the earlier morning, kind of while it's still a little bit cooler,
Yeah.
And then this particular Boy Scout camp in Palo Pinto, and I guess the one in Lake Bridgeport as well, they've got all these like summer camp like wooden pallets, and they make these big stacks, so it creates another little gradient, humidity and temperature gradient there.
Yeah.
And I mean, just you go through, just flip the pallets, and you just kind of surprise them there. So that's the best way to do it. But I mean, you can also tree them. The one that regurgitated a rattlesnake, I caught it up in a tree, just climbing up there after a little, not a mesquite, but one of the cedar trees. I'm not sure exactly what species it is. I'm a bad naturalist. I need to work on that. But yeah, and then the first coach I ever caught. Do what? Sorry.
Better than me, dude. I don't know a damn thing about plants.
I'm trying to work on it. I want to be a well-rounded nature dude. So I'm trying to work on it a little bit. But the first coach whip that I caught, I actually was going after a pair of six-line race runners. I'm not sure what the scientific name is for those or what, but they're like a kind of Central Texas kind of like whiptail equivalent there.
We got them here too.
Yeah, but I saw two of them. They were breeding as I was setting up these summer camp tents and all that on tent day is what we call it. And I guess the coach whip saw them too. And the coach whip grabbed one of the lizards. I grabbed the other one, and then I grabbed the coach whip.
Nice.
So it worked out.
Wow.
There. So, yeah.
Whoa. Are you gonna make some coach whip traps out of with some lizards? You're gonna tie down one of these six-line race runners and use it as a bait?
Yeah, man, that'd be nice. Yeah. If I can get my hand on another race runner, those are difficult.
Yeah, might be even harder than a coach whip to catch, actually.
Actually, I'd be willing to, dude. The ones here, you can catch them pretty easy. It's
really?
yeah. Relatively easy, right? They're not super simple, but two things. The first is that you can noose them fairly easily, So I remember when I was still learning how to field herp properly, I would practice noosing on stuff locally because I could just drive out and go see if I could catch anything. And Those and earless lizards, I was able to manage to learn
Nice.
how to noose okay, and I'd let them go and stuff. Of course, I'm not keeping anything here from Colorado, but
Mhm.
yeah, you could. I always wanted to keep the little 6-line race runners. They're really freaking cool. Those
Yeah.
are badass little lizards. They look like little tegus, is what.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, they're so sick. Speaking of lizards that people overlook, those and zebra tails and anyway,
Yeah.
I'm getting ahead of myself. We can get back on track. I'm thinking
Well,
a lot.
actually,
Yeah.
with the zebra tails and the earless lizards in particular, the reason that I think that they're not more popular, I've got a buddy in Southern California that's actually worked with those a bit. They require like a winged insect, so like
Interesting.
flies and small grasshoppers and like moths. You know, that he said that they needed those for some reason.
Interesting.
So I don't know. That might
That's
be
really interesting.
there, but yeah.
I know there's a guy, a fellow I used to know. I haven't spoken with him in a long time, but he used to keep a few euros, but he was keeping his name, Yashka or Joshka Schultz, I think was his
Hmm.
name. And
Hmm.
he used to keep, he had Holbrookia from like white sanded areas where there were these really light colored earless lizards, and he kept and bred those things over in Europe. He did a great job with them. They're
Interesting.
really weird. Super cool. It's such a niche little lizard to be interested in,
Yeah.
but it makes
Yeah,
sense.
totally.
Like, especially if you're overseas, if you hear about these little things called earless lizards or 6-line. I mean, it's just like us being interested in a xenogama or something like
Yeah,
that,
totally.
or a like a phrynosoma or whatever. Just like these, it's just like a little obscure, I don't know. Maybe that's just my opinion, but that's crazy. Because I don't know how you catch those. Those are
It's
those are
all
some
about the element of surprise, I think, and the stealth with them.
whatever, Roy. You're not a ninja.
I'm not a ninja, but I've caught a good number of Masticophis at this point.
Have you
And
really?
yeah, I mean, well, we don't. So I've caught, let's see, I guess 3 species of them, but one of them, lateralis, Masticophis lateralis, is California stripe racer or chaparral whip snake, sometimes folks call them. Those are actually really common where I live locally, and it took me a really long time to figure out the right habitat for them, but once I did, I was like, okay. And the first time I ever saw one, I literally dove head first, like down a slope to grab it because I was like, what? Like, I'd been looking for one for a while, and finally when I saw it, I just like I temporarily lost my mind. I did catch the snake, but in hindsight, it was not the most graceful move.
Yeah.
The first time I caught a coach whip, it was actually in Arizona. It was a Pisces, and it was a black one, solid black. I actually kept it, had it for several years, but it was kind of cruising around some boulders, and I kind of snuck up behind, like used one of the boulders for cover and kind of snuck up, and I lunged and aiming for the mid body of the snake, and of course it started moving as soon as I lunged, and I got like the last like couple inches of its tail. And it immediately, before I could even blink, it had bitten me on the face.
That's
I
another
think
reason why people don't
it
keep
grabbed
them.
my upper lip.
No way.
Yep. It was like I grabbed it, and before my brain could comprehend that I even had it in my hands, it had already bit me on the face.
Wow.
That was a great snake. I had him for a really long time. His name was Cochise.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, cheese. That's hilarious.
After the county in Arizona and the great Apache leader.
Right. No, I
Cochise.
get it.
Yeah.
I totally am aware of the namesake. It's just that's a hilarious choice. That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow, how
Well,
cool.
Connor, I wanted to kind of draw a little bit off of your like kind of field herping experience, and I know that like obviously you have been heavily involved with the scouts and just kind of, your handle is naturalist herps, and I know that you're something of an outdoorsman, and I'm curious, just like how that has that influenced the way you view herpetoculture? Does that play a role in like how you like, yeah, how you see yourself in the trade?
So I started off, I guess keeping snakes, working for that center. Of course, rack systems,
Yeah.
and they have their use, I mean, with the collection that size, it's really hard to keep 300 animals in just 4x2x2s or whatever, and you don't have to do that. It's your choice, as long as the animals are, I guess thriving is, I don't want to get on that right now. Sorry. But
okay.
anyway, so just going and just spending more time out in habitat, particularly in Palo Pinto County. Like I said, I've staffed out there for the last 6 years. Actually, last summer was the last summer that I staffed out there as the nature director. I was just hiking around solo out there, in the early mornings, and just watching, just coming across cool plants, things like that. Like whenever I go hiking around, and I'm kind of like I need to know everything, I don't know what the word, like if there's one word for that, I'm not sure, whatever. Kind of dumb, but I'm sorry, whatever. But I've got this app called PlantNet and iNaturalist, of course, and so I just want to know, like, if there's this, like the fern that texted
the one you sent me.
The oval leaf cliff brick, it's such a cool niche plant, it only grows in limestone, which is like super cool, temperate fern species in north central Texas area. But just if there's something cool, like a cool plant, I want to know what that is, so that whenever I take scouts on nature hikes, I can be well informed and be like, oh, this is this plant, this is what it does, or this is this bug, this is its ecological role in the entire like world, and I just like knowing how things work together. And then totally. I guess as far as translating that to keeping, spending time in habitat, seeing snakes in habitat, like I used to keep Nerodia. I kept Cypodon, your rhomba for your northern water snakes, the Cypodon, your diamondback water snakes, rhomba for Erythrogaster, the plain bellies. And then I briefly kept Confluence, your broad-banded water snakes there. And just like there's this one spot, I reshared a post, like a little timeline post on my Facebook today. I was herp down in Houston. What was it? 2 years ago or so, and just this one spot, like I was going for buttermilk racers, didn't find any too early in the year, but just seeing all these confluence and ribbon snakes just like pouring out of the trees like rain, it was insane. And just trying to replicate that in captivity and make sure my animals like I said, just it's cool watching them do their thing, and I like figuring out what they do in the wild, like seeing their niche and then trying to best replicate that in captivity. Obviously, I can't provide like 100 yards of space, like a football field, for a pair of coachwhips. I can't do that. I'm sorry. But just doing what I can to just have a little piece of nature as best I can. I'm not doing like completely bioactive. And then I'm not sure where I align with like the simple bioactive as well, which you guys are familiar with. But kind of somewhere in between, like, I don't know.
I totally get where you're coming from.
I'm kind of trailing off. I'm sorry, but
it's okay.
I'm totally following you, and I really relate. Just I think that it was actually, right around the age that you are right now, like when I really started getting out hiking a lot, like you said, like just going out solo and like just being curious about everything. And that definitely that remains for me, like where it's at within herpetoculture, is the same thing you're describing about just like getting to see the animals perform natural behaviors, whatever those behaviors are. And it's just, there's something so gratifying about that. It's just like, it's hard to put words to articulate it, but there's something, it's just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
Definitely. Yeah. And like for example, I haven't seen Texas night snakes. I haven't seen them in the wild yet,
Mhm.
but I'm keeping them in captivity. And then so like I said, at that center we had a pair of Texas night snakes. Never got them to breed or anything like that, but they would eat and survive, which I guess that's kind of the base level.
Mhm.
Not trying to hate on what the care was like there. I'm just
Yeah.
there's different ways of keeping.
Yeah.
And so originally I had gotten that got in this first group of night snakes, just two females, and just kept them on Aspen exactly the way that we were keeping them there. One of them had like kind of a patchy shed, so I went ahead and
Mhm.
threw a shed box in there, and it would spend the entire day in the shed box there. And I'm
Mm.
thinking back to their habitat. A lot of
Oh
times you'll see
yeah.
them rock cuts in West Texas, or you can flip them underneath rocks and things like that too. But I'm just thinking about like how much moisture is there in those cracks, because like I would assume, spending the whole day in there, you're getting different humidity gradients and things like that. They're not just like a desert species that doesn't need this or that.
Yeah.
So that's something kind of cool that I don't know, just
Yeah. It's
neat
like it's
little.
like, oh, it's like that's why they're in these cracks all day long.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's like
yeah,
oh, it's like, yeah, that moisture, gets trapped in there. It's like I think you mentioned that on Colubrid and Colubroid. I
right,
listened to
yeah,
an
yeah,
episode on there where you're talking about with Zonata, and it's the exact same thing. It's like
yeah,
they're in these cracks because they're super sensitive, in terms of like seeking certain moisture variables, humidity variables, and like where I am, we actually have Zonata, but it's one of the hardest places in California to find them because like there's just a few weeks of the year usually of like this window where they're kind of closer to the surface and easier to find. But the rest of the year, it's like it's 110 degrees out, and it's like
Mhm.
they don't want anything to do with that. They're deep in these cracks in the granite, and yeah, it's cool. It's cool, like picking up on those little nuances. I love that.
Actually, I would be interested in going back to where you stopped yourself, Connor. When you were like, "Oh no, I don't. I would. When I don't want to. Let's not talk about that yet. Let's talk about that. Can I? Why did you stop yourself?
like with the simple bioactive and things like that.
I think. Or no. Before with I think you're talking about Rax, right?
Oh, okay, that, yeah. So I mean, I've kept snakes both ways,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoy seeing my animals out and doing their thing. I
Mm-hmm.
just don't get the satisfaction of keeping in rack or tub type setups just because I don't get to see them.
Mhm.
Um, Myself personally, I've gone through the Noah's Ark kind of style of keeping.
Mhm.
I
Mm-hmm.
would buy a lot of different cool oddball colubrids, and keep them at this facility whenever I worked there for a bit. And then at one point at my house, I had as many as 60 snakes in one room, which is kind of a lot
Mm-hmm.
for your average bedroom.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and a lot of those were kind of smaller diminutive species. Like, I mean, I kept and bred DK's brown snakes. Had
Mm-hmm.
northern ringneck snakes for a bit. I kept um, what is it? The pine woods litter snakes, different things like that. Just kind of smaller species, and then just a bunch of just I don't know. I was on the milk snake kind of trend for a bit. But I mean, just you can't really see them do their thing, and it's kind of hard whenever you're keeping obviously, keeping smaller snakes, it's easier to get them in a like a more natural type setup, where they can kind of
Mm-hmm.
exhibit some of their things.
Yeah.
But like you keep a milk snake or a Louisiana milk snake. That was the species that I searched for like 6 years. And I got them, I kept them on Aspen with a water ball and a hide. They didn't really do much because I didn't really provide much, and that's on
Mm-hmm.
me. Kind of just got a little bit bored, to be honest, there, and just moved them to someone that appreciated them a little bit more. That's just not my style of keeping. And since I've downsized and focused a little bit more, my collection, I've had more rewarding keeping. Uh, So
Mhm.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, there's definitely something about like, I don't know. I think we spoke about this with several of our guests in the past. I can think of like Philip Tremper comes to mind, but this whole concept around just like how herpetoculture can kind of inform a person about their own limitations, you know, and like
Mm,
finding that kind of sweet spot about where it actually does work and where it you know remains a satisfying and a gratifying experience to keep, and then where it switches
right,
over to becoming like, you know, a chore or um you know something akin to stamp collecting more than it is like working
yeah,
with living
yeah,
animals, you know. And it's
right,
like it's interesting. I think that that's just like one of the cool things about this practice that we're all undertaking, is the ways in which we can like kind of learn more about ourselves doing it. And um I feel really similarly, like for me it works better for me to work with like a smaller number of species and kind of more complex, slightly more complex setups, you know, and than it is to like simplify and have a higher number. But that's just because like that's kind of what keeps me interested, you know. And
right.
um I think that for some people that's like they can kind of do it a little bit more simply and stay with it, you know, and
Mhm.
stay engaged, and all power to them. But
mm. Yeah,
what do you think
fast.
on that, Phil?
Yeah, I feel like this is a particular topic upon which I'm changing my views all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time finding equilibrium on this particular topic, and I think it's probably a good thing, at least for the time being. But you know, I've kept animals in racks before. I back in the day when I was a younger kid, I tried keeping some bull snakes, and I only had them up until juveniles or like half grown size, but I had them in some rack systems. And then for a little while, I kept some African fat tails and some leopard geckos a long time ago, also in rack systems. And then a few, I had some knobtail geckos as well that I kept in racks, and then eventually slimmed down on some of those, and then moved my amii into enclosures where they get a little bit of UV exposure in the evenings and in the mornings. Um, and the problem is I feel like I'm able to inhabit both sides of this to a certain extent. Like
Mm-hmm.
on the one hand, um, of course, uh, I can understand the argument that says if this animal can't even stretch out to totally in its enclosure, that's a problem. I understand the argument about sensory deprivation. I understand sort of the monocultural problems that come as a result of sort of industrialized rat keeping and feeding, say, a single food item
Mm-hmm.
exclusively, or things like this. And I think, on the one hand, I vibe with all of those things. I can understand the ways in which they're a bad thing. um on the other hand, I there are also aspects of the argument against those things that I also think maybe don't have complete they're not as complete as they could be.
Mm-hmm.
Like when people will say, oh, if an animal lives in a rack for a long time and does well and breeds, this is more a description of the resilience of the animal than it is the effectiveness of the keeping. And I say, okay, sure. And you know show me a leopard gecko that's living 30 years in the wild, uh
Mm-hmm.
and yet they're living long full lives in captivity, in rack systems, living a long time. um Now, I also have there's something I've been thinking about recently, which is that I'm gonna wager that if we had a camera on a rack kept animal, we'd probably feel like, just say all the time, like throw a little ring camera
Mm-hmm.
inside the tub and just see what the animal's doing for most of its time. Yeah, I think we'd start to feel a little bit weirder about some of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff that seems to do pretty well in in
Mm-hmm.
in really small confines. And so, on the one hand, I guess I find myself drifting more towards I'm not really into this particular thing side of things. At the same time, I feel like it'd be really important for me to leave room and say that there's probably examples of it being done well, or being done in a way that makes sense, at least in some ways. I think it can be really challenging to make the argument for like a totally dark, unlit box constantly, because there's just nothing lives that way except for stuff that lives at the bottom of the ocean without any access to light at all, right? I mean, I don't care if it's fully nocturnal animal, there's still moonlight and starlight and variation, and they don't just come out only at night, like we all know the examples of supposedly exclusively nocturnal animals that take advantage of some light at any given point in time. It's like it's like as soon as the sun goes down and it gets past a certain darkness, all the nocturnal stuff isn't like, well, boys, time to clock in. I mean, it's just sort of not how it goes. I don't know, maybe I'm sort of like rambling at this point, but yeah,
and also just kind of like the species that I keep too, like with the Masticophis, long, slender snakes, very active, cruising around quite a bit. Your Hypsiglena, the opposite end of the spectrum, kind of smaller size there. They can kind of flatten their head pretty well. They could easily pop out of a rack system there.
Oh yeah.
The glossy snakes and scarlet kings could probably do fine. And then I've got some pets, I guess, like the rubber boa, the Chapala garter, stuff like that. But I don't know. But for what I'm really passionate about, they really wouldn't do super great in racks, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
Right, and there's other stuff too, which is that I also think that it's a little bit that it clearly is something of a sliding scale, right? I mean, especially when we're talking about animals that are confined in some way, right? I mean, even like in what universe are any of my Uromastics that if their wild counterparts are never going to encounter a wall, at least not one that they can't scale, right? In what universe are they going to encounter a basking object, an object under which they're going to bask that doesn't move, right? Or in what universe are they going to encounter a bedding, unless they're on a rock where if they start to dig, they hit a barrier? I mean, there's so many ways in which what we're doing, it's like, again, it is a sliding scale where it's like, we're gonna say, okay, as soon as we slide this far, we're going to create this arbitrary marker and say past this point, it's not okay. But you could go one step over that line and now it's all right. Now it's okay to keep this animal confined, or this is a sufficient amount of sensory deprivation, and I think this verges on a lot of stuff where it's like, we're talking about, you drift into the ethics of keeping animals in the first place, which again, I'm happy to have that conversation. I think it's totally okay to do what we're doing. I mean, I'm not getting into that area of things, but I just feel like, I don't know. It feels like a more complicated, slightly more nuanced topic than, like I love seeing the trend in herpetoculture towards way more improvement in baseline standard of care. And like, that's one of the things that I'm working towards. It's amazing. I want it. But I also, I just wonder about the about like, what about at what point is too much scrutiny, where is it like retightening that screw a little bit too tight on the confines of what we're trying to do. And I don't really know. I honestly don't have any idea. I'm not sure. Kind of just brainstorming out loud on this. Yeah.
No, I think it's I think it's like you say, there's a lot of room for nuance in it. And I think that, I don't know, Phil, you and I have a solo show coming
We
up
do.
here, our first solo show, since our first episode, I should say. So I guess that'll be our second overall, but that could be a good moment maybe to dive into more of that. But
Oh, well,
I'm
but now it's not
curious.
the time. Is that what you're saying, Roy? Now it's
No, I think it's
I'm just
I think it's
kidding.
good. I just think that I want to ask Connor about this book that he's working on.
Yeah,
I
me
know that
too.
he's working on a book. I've had the pleasure to kind of have a sneak peek at it. That what's been contributed so far, but I'm curious if you could just share a little bit with our listeners about what you're working on there.
Yeah. So, like, I guess, I don't claim to be an expert in anything that I do. I just want to share what information has worked for me. And then my co-author, William Huntsman, who has produced Masticophis Pass as well, just kind of our combined information. We want to put that out there. So hopefully there's less discouragement, I guess, from people getting into Masticophis, because if you go to Reptiles magazine right now, they say it does terrible in captivity. They're just going to bite you, poop all over you, blah, 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 lizard feeders only, whatever. Yeah, we just want to put together this nice effort. And so as far as the book is concerned, what we do is we start off with like a nice species breakdown. So like the first couple pages or whatever, just like a list of every single species. There's like 17 or 18 species of Masticophis. And then to be updated with current taxonomy, kind of hurts my heart to do this, but we're calling them coluber. So William Huntsman is a little bit more knowledgeable of coluber than me. I've kept black racers and a few others and things like that. But so we're doing all of coluber itself.
Cool.
So there's species breakdown there. We're going to have kind of like a field guide where it's kind of like a deep dive into each individual species and subspecies, where it's going to have a 2 or 3 photos of the species itself at different various stages of life. There's going to be a species description, habitat description, any general notes, and then a range map, of that species there. From there, once we get through all 18 species of Masticophis, and then however many, I don't have the number off the top of my head for the coluber there, we go into just general care. And we do note some differences between your flagellum, your coachwhip subspecies, your whip snake species, and then of course some of the differences with the coluber as well. You've got your more arid, your western yellow belly racers, and you also have like Everglades racers, like down in South Florida. You've got tan racers just in the really humid areas, things like that. We make some differences there as far as just general carekeeping goes, but across the board, they're outside of temperature and humidity gradients. There's not really a whole lot of differences there. After we get through the general care and things like that, we go to a portion that's like, how do you select? How do you purchase an animal that you're interested in buying? Things to look for. Different questions to ask, things like that. And then this is where we kind of get into, I guess, not a direct copy, but some similarities between the complete Subok, if you guys are familiar with that book there. Just kind of going into like how to select your animal, questions you should ask, some different vet notes. I've got a friend that is a veterinarian, so just kind of talking about different, how to deal with different parasites, things like that. They don't really have a whole lot of diseases, outside of captivity. I mean, of course, you get into captivity, you get crypto, things like that, you know, watch out for. So there's gonna be a section kind of talking about that from a person that's more official and smarter than me. So that's good. And then from there, my favorite portion of the book is localities. Nice. We're gonna try and hit as many, we don't want to just make it like a picture book, but show some different examples of the species throughout their ranges. If you look at eastern coachwhips, in Florida, like South Florida or central South Florida, you've got the nice black and white gradient animals there that are just insane. You go to the Ozarks, you've got some that are like solid black with red and gold stripes, things like that. In Texas, they're more like a brown and black there. But just getting different, you're showing off those cool phenotypes. Because I mean, if you go to fauna classified or king snake right now, and you look up like Masticophis, you're just going to see like your standard tan Western coachwhip. Just something that looks not very exciting. But if we can kind of showcase the different variabilities of the different species, I think they'll get a lot more traction. Like I said, the red and blue colorations there of your Pisces, your Billinotis, your Mentavarius. Holy crap, that's going to be your neotropical whip snakes. The different there's 4 different subspecies there. My favorite one is the Trace Marias neotropical whip snake. It's got like a nice kind of sandy coloration there with some nice stripes running the length of the body there. Just insane island species of neotropical whip snake. Absolutely insane. And then my favorite part about this book is just reading more about your some of those island species, like I said. Like for example, the Clarion Island whip snake, which I've talked to Roy quite a bit about, that maybe going in, seeing if there's any way that we can legally visit that island. But it's the one of 2 snake species on Clarion Island. It's the Clarion Island whip snake, also called the Clarion Island coachwhip, whatever. It's Masticophis anthonii. The second snake species there is the Clarion Island night snake, which is kind of cool how that worked out. But
there we
anyway,
go.
but these
Connor's Island.
Pretty much, but these Clarion Island whip snakes, their food source is the Clarion Island tree lizard, which is like this electric blue lizard. I'm forgetting the genus. It's like Juta, something like that.
Eurosaurus.
So they look drastically different compared to the southwestern U.S. equivalents of those. They're these really, really pretty electric blue lizards. So they eat those for the majority of the year. And then there's these birds, migratory birds, that'll come into this island. I forget what species. There's probably a handful. I'm not exactly sure, really. I'm a bad naturalist. I apologize. So they'll go feast on these birds when they come into the island, and with that very high lizard and bird diet, there's notes of their skin actually feeling oily to the touch, which is just like so cool to me. Like, oh my gosh, I need to get there and I need to experience this.
Absolutely.
And they got this really awesome, like kind of rusty coloration to them. It's just really, really beautiful snakes. So there's a locality portion of the book there.
I'm looking forward to that.
We didn't set like we want to be done by this time, because this is like a passion project where we really want to get as good of info out there as we can and just make it a good quality, taxonomically correct book. So that way, I don't have a degree. I'm a hobbyist, I guess, but I want to make something that's relevant and that people will enjoy and possibly refer to for questions and things like that. So,
absolutely. We need more books like that.
Yeah, I mean, just being a hobbyist doesn't preclude you from being able to contribute.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's my first time trying something like this, so I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm doing my best, and hopefully people like that kind of thing. So.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it'll be useful for sure. And I mean, it's got to start somewhere, man. I mean, regardless of your perception of your own qualifications, there's not a really massive distinction between what you're doing and what somebody at maybe just minus a lab coat or something,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's sort of the same work. and there's more than enough room and opportunity for anybody who disagrees with you to do the same.
Right.
So I feel like it's good on you for doing it. Need dedicated
Totally.
people taking on obscure stuff that most other people aren't giving the attention to. So good for you for doing it, man.
My favorite part about this whole process has been talking to just different field herpers about just like their observations in the field. You know, I need a lot of pictures. So if any of y'all have pictures of any colubrid species or Masticophis, I would love to have them. Just we'll get to where you can find me later. But yeah, definitely that would be a huge help for the locality portion there. But just talking to people and just all the stuff that I'm reading is from like the early 1900s. So it's kind of semi-dated information there, but there hasn't been a lot of development as far as coachwhips and racers and whip snakes and stuff like that. I guess, I don't know, but it's been a lot of fun just talking to people, networking to people, and talking to people from different countries even, you know, and just sharing information is awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Right,
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm something I'm kind of curious about here, Connor, is what if you look at herpetoculture broadly, so say other than racks, let's take the rack argument out of the equation, because it's, you know, we've talked a little bit about it already, and it ends up being like a little, I don't know, it's like an easy target for people to harp on. But broadly, do you have other thoughts or feelings about what you'd like to see less and or more of in herpetoculture?
Yeah. So I'm sure everybody's on the same page with this, but just whenever I scroll through Facebook Marketplace, I'm looking for those big giant aquariums for my animals and things like that. It just really hurts to see some of the reptile cages that are for sale on Facebook Marketplace, and it's like a piece of reptile carpet, coconut hide, and then like this massive like light fixture on this 10-gallon tank. You know, it really sucks. You know, you're not providing a proper gradient and things like that. So it'd be great to see some type of like school or something like that for an intro to herpetoculture, which y'all talked about before. You know, that'd be great. And then something that's not related entirely to that at all is just more appreciation for what we have in our backyards. Imports are great. You guys are doing excellent jobs with all that stuff. But like recently, I think it's Illinois, like they just destroyed like the last piece of their natural prairie or whatever habitat there for some housing development or something like that, you know. And like the species that won't exist anymore because that habitat is gone, you know, like if someone decided to breed this one toad species that was plentiful at one time, you know, and then their habitat just got destroyed, you know, they're gone forever, you know. So like whenever I was breeding DK's brown snakes, they're not gonna, in my lifetime, they're probably not going to disappear, go extinct or anything like that, you know. But just with Facebook, it's kind of helped out with like the group functions, finding weird niche people that have similar interests, you know. But just seeing people just give a shot to some of the stuff that's in your backyard, because it may not be like it's common. It might be common in your area, you know. But like I look at a striped racer, the chaparral whip snake or whatever it's called, Lateralus. You know, I'm like, that's the coolest thing ever, you know. And, I just don't see those. You know, they're super common over there. You know, the beautiful gold belly and the gold kind of chin with the red tail there. It's insane.
It's amazing.
Smaller size Masticophis there. But yeah, I mean, it's just like something else that
what is it? Do you have any thoughts about what it is that make it complicated for people, or why people don't work with as many of the species that are in their backyards, or like what, you know, what it is? I mean, you know, obviously we can talk about the variety of laws and stuff like that, but like taking that out of the equation altogether, like what do you think it is that prevents people from working with stuff that's more common to where, or local to where they are?
I think they're familiar with it and they see it. a lot, like,
Mhm.
if I, like, whenever I first started keeping reptiles, I saw Gulf Coast toads. They're awesome. They're great,
Yeah.
but then I see a picture of like a blue Baron tracer, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want that. Like, I
Yeah.
was saw some reptile magazine article where there was a Lake Chapala garter snake there. The beautiful blue belly. Insane colorations. And I told myself, I'm like, I have to have that snake. At some point in my life, I'm going to own one of those. And now I've got one. But it's
Yeah.
um, just
There's
I don't
like
know.
something
They're so
about,
common. You see them all over the place. They're just they. I don't say they become less cool for you because Gulf Coast toads still have a soft spot with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's you just see them.
Yeah.
I don't know. And
Did people like get like habituated to it or something,
yeah. That's the word. Sorry. Yeah.
and there's also like at the same time, there's like, I think that there's also just like an innate draw to the exotic, and
Mm.
Mhm.
people are always like, or people are often just interested in things that are, yeah, that are unfamiliar and novel and exotic. And,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, I think it felt like you make a good point too, just about like this, like the rules and regulations sometimes can be prohibitive too. And,
Yeah.
um, there's actually there's a lot of California native species that I would totally love to work with that, that there's just a lot of barriers that make it hard to do that.
Sure.
At some
Sure.
point, maybe some of those can be overcome, and I'll figure out ways to do it in a good way. But you know, at least I get to see him, get to go field herping with him,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe gift them out of state to folks like Connor, folks
I
who
mean,
can get him
I know a
established.
guy. So yeah.
you know, I think that that's actually really cool too. In some ways, actually, that it gets people to the people that really want them, can still have access to them in some way if they have the right connections and stuff like that. But
Sure.
anyway,
No, that's great. Definitely.
I'm kind of like, moving forward with that too. I'm curious about like what do you have on the horizon? Like, do you have any kind of goals or visions that you're moving toward with your projects? I know you've got some kind of newer projects underway or new arrivals over there. Just curious what's next.
Yeah. So I've gotten a lot better at telling myself no. Whenever I see things cool with expos and things like that. So that has been a huge help there. Um, but as far as things that I really want to add, I'll start off with snakes, then I'll drift from snakes to a few other things.
Mhm.
Um, I would really love to add some Mesa Verde night snakes.
Mm,
They're native to Utah, and I know Utah just recently in the last couple of years opened up reptile collecting and things like that.
Mhm.
So that's awesome. They've got a little bit more like the patterning is more bold on
mm,
this kind of particular area that I've been kind of scoping out online through iNaturalist, which I'm sure people are gonna be like, oh, whatever, But
mhm,
they've got the nice bold patterning there with a nice kind of like a salmon type background there, which is really neat.
mm.
And then so the Mesa Verde night snakes, I don't want to lose my train of thought. Sorry. I
Okay.
would really love to work with California lyre snakes.
Oh
And
yeah.
uh,
Mm.
uh, I do know one guy in Florida who has had success breeding them. He's got this awesome collection of lyre snakes in Florida, which is super cool. And he's currently waiting to offer any available until he proves out his exanthic male that he has.
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
He's got a really cool locality morph thing going on, which is amazing. But as far as securing a hatchling, it's my convincing strategy has not worked yet. So I'll probably have to go collect collect one or just find one at a random expo or things like that. Sometimes things pop up like that.
Mhm.
And then I'm really digging the glossy snakes a lot. They're, as far as their care goes, they're not particularly difficult at all. But I still want to have something that's a little bit kind of oddball, but more the beginner level there.
Yeah.
That way I kind of have different, like a diversity of kind of, I don't want to say clients or customers or whatever, but just hook people up with cool snakes.
Yeah, of course.
So I'd like to add, go ahead.
Oh no, I
No.
just said, yeah, of course. I'm totally with you there.
I was talking about glossy snakes to one of my buddies. He was telling me that Kern County, the animals he's seen from there, are like bone white,
Mhm.
which is
Whoa.
like super cool for a glossy snake. And I'm just, a big thing with me is like, I'm not a huge fan of like morphs and things like that. So I want to always would produce locality specific animals that are like a good representation of that particular area, with the exception of the albino coach I have, but we can talk about that later. Yeah, I think it's just cool. It's kind of going back to the phenotypes and different colorations throughout the ranges and stuff. I would really like to somehow legally get some nice Kern County glossies there. And then as far as snakes go, pretty much set there with the exception of, I guess, La Paz County, Arizona, Pisces male, for that project that kind of took a little bit of a hit. But as far as securing one of those, it's a very tricky situation to do legally, just because you can't purchase wild caught animals from Arizona. So
yeah,
probably something that I'd have to take on myself, a trip or something like that. I'm very, very cautious now dealing with that lizard guy. I want to make sure that everything is by the book, 100% legal with everything that I do. So I'm very fortunate to have the animals that I have, and I don't want that to be taken away from me.
yeah.
So yeah, and then I guess moving on from snakes there, Texas alligator lizards are amazing. Kind of underrated lizard species there, native to central and I guess a little bit west central Texas there. And then I guess they do range down probably into a little bit of, I'm not sure how far south they range down. You might be able to talk a little bit more on that. But they're just super cool, underrated lizard that I just personally really enjoy. There was one at that Boy Scout center that I worked at. There was a little educational ambassador there for the reptile shows we did. And then I briefly kept one for a little bit, but then I downsized from my Noah's Ark collection to focus a little bit more on the Masticophis, and immediately regretted selling that animal. So I'm in a more comfortable spot to get back into those there, where I'm not feeling like animal care is a chore there. So I would love, I've already got some Texas alligators coming later this year. One from Roy, and then some from another friend down in Johnson City area. And then let's see, I like to try the zebra tails one more time, just give them one more shot. But I'm not sure how I feel about that 100%, just because the winged insect feeder option is going to be a little bit tricky there. I know Cali grasshoppers provides pretty good selection of grasshoppers there, but I don't want to get a group of zebra tail lizards in and have them not thrive.
Yeah, totally.
So I kind of got to weigh those options out and see just kind of what opportunities come and pop up at different times. And then I've always loved pancake tortoises, but I've kind of heard some mixed reviews on those. So I'm not 100% sure whether I want to add those or not yet. But that is one of those species that I've just always liked, and just got to do a little bit more research there before I decide to say, oh yes, I would like some of those.
Yeah, definitely an amazing species.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by, you say you're not a morph guy, and yet you mention a locality morph of lyre snake, and then albino something, what was that?
Western coachwhip.
Okay, so yeah, talk to me about the distinction between a locality morph and a morph in your mind, and then about how you're squaring those two on an albino coachwhip.
Yeah. So for me, kind of I like knowing all the answers to all the things whenever I'm going hiking and things like that. That does translate to my animals as well. I like to know who produced the animal in my collection, how many hands it's been through, like their names, things like that. I've got records of that.
Sure.
Or who collected the animal, what county it's from. As far as locality goes, I try and get like as precise to the GPS location as possible. Usually for pairings, I don't have an issue with pairing like the same county, but like I've got a red-faced female Western coach whip that I have like it's from the North Marathon, Texas area, and I've got the exact road that animal was collected on. So I'm going to do a non-locality pairing with those. I've got a non-locality male. That's going to be okay. Not ideal, but going back to starting with the Alterna, whenever I was cleaning those snake racks, cleaning the Alterna cages, the different phenotype differences between even the same county, they've got it down to the road cut, things like that.
Sure.
There's not as noticeable differences with Masticophis with the road cuts, but just the vibrancies of different colors and things like that varies, depends on the counties there. As far as what I pair, I try and when possible, I try and produce locality specific animals. As far as the morph game is concerned, like I said, I like to produce animals that you would see naturally in the wild. This albino Western coach whip popped up, like going back to my routine, my daily routine, you go through all the websites you got to go through and you check Facebook, I was going through a snake ID Facebook group because sometimes you can still see some cool things there. And then I saw this guy that was keeping a albino Western coach whip in a little deli cup. He had it on some like coconut coir that was like super wet, and it was growing the terrarium grass, the Lugardi terrarium grass in there.
Yeah.
Great way to get an RI for a snake, and he said it was too small for pinkies and it wouldn't eat dubia roaches. And I'm like, well, let me, I talked to him a little bit about the situation there and how it might do a little bit better to get started in my care. And then later down the line, I would get him, once he's learned enough about Masticophis and he's either said, yes, I would still want to keep Masticophis, or maybe that's not for me, I would gift him something that I produced from that albino animal, whether it's a head or an albino or whatnot, So that particular animal was collected on inside a warehouse on the concrete floor, which is not a normal spot for a coach whip in Midlothian, Texas. So my goal is to produce locality specific albinos from Midlothian, Texas.
Okay,
That's my plan there. And then just knowing that way I know that yes, it's from this locality, that's this albino line, that we're not doing we're not producing white MBKs, Mexican black king snakes, that are rumored to have different species or whatnot in them, and I just know what hands these animals have come through and things like that, because it's kind of tricky. I don't know, just
Things tend to get murky. Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm okay with locality specific morphs, but some of the morphs, like specifically with like ball pythons and garter snakes and things like that, they just look a little bit they just kind of look fake. I don't know, they don't look like a real living breathing snake, to me at least, and it's just not something that excites me. I mean, it's cool that you're able to produce all these different colors, but it's just not my cup of tea.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. That's fair enough. I was just curious. Yeah. I always like to, every now and again, I like to kind of push back on stuff and try to get more of a sense of where you're coming from on certain stuff. And I don't mean it in a critical way in any way.
Right. Yeah. Just trying to understand.
Yeah. Just pure curiosity. So that was very helpful. And I very much appreciate that. Thank you for going into detail on that. So with all that in mind, we are creeping right up on 2 hours, real close. I know time fucking flies by when you're
Yeah.
having great conversation. And by no means am I trying to stop the convo now, but I do think we should maybe start moving towards that, so I can get some dinner at some point. But that's just because I'm in a bulk phase. No, I'm just playing. But Roy, I want to kick it back your way and make sure that you get out what questions you have and everything like that, so that way we can, do a good job.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've covered most of the questions that I had. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot that we could still talk about, and we'll continue the conversations, and we'll definitely have you back at some point, Connor, if you'd be willing. Because
Cool, yeah.
yeah, I think that what you're working on is really cool. It's really I'm stoked to hear that you're that Trimorphodon are on your list for the future, because that's a genus that I've always thought was just so interesting, so cool, and they almost remind me of like North American Boiga or something, just like
Yeah.
really big eyes.
Those lyre snakes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I was gonna say exactly the same thing. I was gonna be
They're
like, dude,
so
they look
cool.
just like Boiga.
Yeah. Or like Telescopis, the North African ones. They're so cool. But anyway, yeah, so I think that maybe we should close out with our final question. And I know you've listened to a few episodes you mentioned, so you know what's coming. And it's just, why herpetoculture? Why do we do this thing? Why does it matter? For you.
Well, for me personally, I just like watching things grow. So going through like the hatching out of snakes or live birth with garter snakes and DK, stuff like that, just super cool. And watching them just kind of grow up into adult animals. I do a lot of gardening and stuff like that too. So watching plants grow is really awesome too. Kind of good therapy there. And then I don't know, it's kind of like where all my friends are at right now, hooking up friends with cool snakes and just, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I would do without, not that I'm like reliant on it, whatever, but
Rely on it, man. It's all good.
I'm not sure, really what else I'd be doing if I wasn't spending all my money on snakes and snake food,
Relatable, my friend.
Yeah, relatable indeed. That's how I feel too. And
I like that answer. Watching things grow, I relate to that for sure. There's something pretty magical about that.
Yeah, there's definitely something about feeling like you're sort of involved in this life cycle that's happening in your home, or with your influence in some way, in a way that connects us to what we're doing. And whereas I think in the past we used to be more integrated with that, which is something that Roy Boy and I talk a lot about, just in sort of personal conversation and stuff. So I feel like that sort of aligns with what we're talking about. That's great, man. I love that response.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Connor, where can folks find you if they want to reach out and get in touch and send you all the amazing Masticophis pictures that they have?
Excellent. Yeah. So you can reach out through Instagram. You can find me at Naturalist Herps. You can just shoot me a text if you want to say, or just a DM there, say, hey, I've got whatever pictures of this or that, and I can send you my email there, because it's a little bit easier to get photos into the document there. You can find me on Facebook, just Connor Wardle, Wardle there. And then I've got a YouTube as well. The link is in my Instagram bio there. I've got a bunch of care videos and things like that for some of the more unique species that I've kept, if you want to kind of dive into those or whatnot. And yeah, I don't bite. So I try and answer questions when I've got time, whenever I'm not working, and yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, really appreciate your time and for joining us today. Big fan of what you're doing. And
thanks, man.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Thank you. Yeah,
Hell
excellent.
Awesome,
right,
Connor. Thanks so much, dude.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hit the button.
Yeah, hit that button, Roy.